Hello and welcome to Noles Quality Control. I'm your host, Ben Meyerson. This is presented by Tomahawk Nation. If you're listening to us on an audio platform, on a podcast platform, make sure you go and check us out on video as well, because we're over on YouTube, on Twitter, on Tomahawk Nation's Twitter, and then my own YouTube channel, which you can find at Ben Meyerson Football. That's the exact name of the channel. It's easy to find, and if you can't find it there, just go over to Tomahawk Nation's Twitter. I'm sure you'll be able to track it down. But I'm very, very glad to be joined again by Logan Robinson, founder, owner of Nole Gameday. Logan, since we last talked, there's been a lot that's been going on in the FSU football world. There's a huge recruiting camp that we were both at on Saturday. There's been a lot of talk about, where is this team going? What kind of roster are they building going forward, especially with all these high school recruits and all the noise around them? But how you doing, Logan? How you doing right now, man?
Doing fantastic. It was good to catch up with you in town. I know that you just graduated, so back at home now, but it was good for you to come in town and we got to hang out and get into the recruiting world, which, you and I are still learning on, getting down all these names and such. And so leaning on a few of the other beat members and helping us out with the recruiting stuff is huge. But it was good to catch up with you. I thought the show was great last week. Like we said, we could talk about this for hours upon hours, but we try to keep it as compact as possible for everyone. But appreciate everybody that enjoyed the last episode and looking forward to continuing to do this all throughout the off season. And, we'll see if Ben wants to keep me around for when the season begins.
Oh, I'm absolutely keeping you around, Logan. Trust me. We'll be good on that. And I was going to say to everyone, I hope who's ever watching is enjoying this. Logan and I have built up a really good rapport. We got to spend a lot of time at spring practice. Like you said, we were together at mega camps. I kind of felt like a stray, like a puppy that day. I was like following you around, trying to get information. I was like, oh, who's Logan talking to? What's he talking about? But this time of the year for Florida State, it's interesting, right? Because obviously you have your mega camp. You bring in some recruits. You bring in some guys who you want to make a good impression on, or maybe some guys who are already committed, and you want to make sure you're holding that relationship. But we'll get to some of that a little bit later. We'll talk about the quarterback position. We'll talk about Chris Parson later. Chris Parson, by the way. Not Parsons. That's anyone who's been screwing that up. I saw, Brendan Sinone put out a tweet about it, and Parson, I think he quote tweeted, was talking a little bit about it. It's not that hard, man. I don't know why so many people screw it up. I think maybe, the first time I read his name, Logan, I was like, I feel like I should say Parsons. I think it's just that natural, like, that inclination you have to end plurals with last names. But Chris Parson was in town at Florida State. So we'll certainly talk about him and all the quarterbacks who are moving forward. But I did want to start the show off on a more broad note in talking about Mike Norvell, his future with the Florida State football program, which, Logan, I want to start off by saying, isn't that secure? Is that fair to say about Mike Norvell?
No, I mean, this is a gigantic year for him, and we've talked about it a lot during those practices, saying, things got to click on all cylinders. It's not only got to click for him, it's got to click for these coaches on the staff. You got talent now, and we felt really good about that defense and Adam Fuller. This is a big time year for him, but going to the big man himself, this has got to be a pivotal year where, last year you were able to take down one of your rivals. That's great. That's awesome. That was at home. That was a great win for him, and trying to create some momentum, maybe get the boosters back in the groove there. But then you can't go down to Florida and lose to an interim head coach and a quarterback that's just kind of throwing to anybody. We could have caught an interception up there in the press box from Emory Jones. So that was an embarrassing loss, and that's something where Mike Norvell was on the right track there, I think, with a really great momentum in the latter half of the season, but something fell off there. And that's something where you can tell that there's still a little bit of a culture change needed, a little bit more maturity that needs to be done. We saw a lot of silly penalties from a few players that game also that hurt them and put them in some really bad spots. And that just continues to show that Mike Norvell has got to do more in the locker room, I think there has been a big change, absolutely.
Yeah.
But there's still more to be done. But he's definitely, this is a pressure season ahead for him. You know, it's all about the hot seat right now. Now that we're in May, June, July, who's on the hot seat? Which coach is on the hot seat? But I do indeed believe absolutely Mike Norvell is on a hot seat here heading into the season. He's got his veteran now quarterback back. You know, this will be his true first year going in as the starter. He wasn't expected to, you know, really, you know, is competitive, competing with McKenzie Milton, yada, yada, yada. But now Jordan Travis is a solidified starter. He's got his quarterback. He's got a defense that I think you're really excited about in the defensive line. You've got a lot of answers. You know, we'll talk about it later. There's definitely some question marks, but this is a big time season for the head coach, Mike Norvell, and he feels good. I think he felt, you know, coming off of it with those interviews, Ben, while we were there, we heard a lot of times, you know, there was maybe one or two practices where, you know, wasn't really liking what he saw. He's a coach that won't say that he hated it. We got to do better. That was awful, blah, blah. He's not like Jimbo is, or how he was in Tallahassee, but you know, he liked the response from those Thursday practices, those guys coming in and responding. And that's something where you're hoping to see maturity in that locker room grow to be able to bounce back like that. Because, you know, at 0-3, that terrible start 0-4, that's just you just can't do that again. So it's definitely it's definitely a high stress. I would not want to be in Mike's shoes right now. I do not want to be in Mike's shoes. So I'll keep it at that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be in Mike's shoes either. And you know, looking at, you mentioned the end of the season, right? How they had some momentum. They beat Miami. They're beating Boston College, I mean, dominantly. Not that Boston College matters as much, but they're building a lot of momentum going into the offseason. And then to end the season like they did, I think it was great that you mentioned that, because it kind of takes a little bit of the air out of the situation, right? It kind of takes a little bit of that shine that Mike Norvell might have been feeling, right? To not be able to qualify for a bowl game when you need that game, and you're playing a Florida team who has nothing to play for and has an interim head coach and has a lot of players who are not going to be there next year, whether it was going to the league or going to different schools, right? So that was a roster that was getting ready to turn over, and the Seminoles could not beat them. So I think there's still a lot of things that Mike Norvell needs to do to get off the hot seat. And I think part of that is not just, you know, winning the games. A lot of the optimism you'll see around Florida State is talking about how close some of those games were, talking about how early in the season they had those opportunities. But Logan, in the same sense, they didn't make the most of those opportunities. And there were a lot of times where they kind of failed when they were presented with those chances to make the most of it. So I think there's a bit of disappointment there, but just looking along this entire staff, how they built this team up, we'll get into the roster building in a minute more specifically, but look at the development of some of their position groups. It's just not good enough, Logan, right? I think we will praise Alex Atkins to the end of the earth. I will. I love Alex Atkins. I think he is a great head or coach for Florida State. I think he's going to be a great future head coach. I kind of tipped that off there, but
yeah, it'll be happening soon. As Florida State fans, you don't want to happen soon, but
it's happening sooner rather than later. And I guess when you just look at the offensive line, positions like wide receiver, tight ends, cornerback, linebacker, there's just a lack of talent and development in some of those positions where they just need to be doing better to get to the status quo, Logan. And I feel like that is the most fair assessment of that, is that Mike Norvell needs to do better getting the right people in place. And I know he tried to get a different wide receiver coach. They tried to change that, but they didn't at the end of the day, Logan. So what do you think of that criticism of Mike Norvell, that they haven't built? They built some of this staff up, right? Odell Haggins, Alex Atkins, Tony Tokars, I really like as a quarterback coach. But then you look across the whole team, you look at all the positions, and it's not as balanced as you would hope.
Yeah, I think Mike Norvell was trying to do a lot of things, a lot of calls, and inside that admin looking to, maybe make some changes on the staff. And I think that's something that Mike Norvell, he's good with that. He's worked with a lot of these talented assistant coaches that are off doing fantastic things for other programs. And, I think money comes into it, and it's a hard thing for Florida State. Kind of currently, I think things are more optimistic than they may be monetarily wise in the budget. I think Florida State and some fans and maybe the outside, kind of community on Twitter and stuff kind of freak out and say, Florida State doesn't have the money to do this. They can't go grab somebody from somewhere. They can't grab this coach because, the money's going to be the problem. But it seems like some things are shifting, definitely with Florida State's new athletic director, Michael Alford. You can tell that they're trying to make some moves in a lot of different ways, and budgeting and things are changing between all the sports and stuff. And it seems like there's a lot of focus towards
football's a priority. That's what I was about to say, Logan. As much as it was a priority in the past, it is the priority now for the athletic office.
Yeah, no, it is. And, I think if, once we start diving into some of these positions, I absolutely hate what is going on in the tight end room for Florida State. And, you look at the coaching too, and if that affects it in any way, shape, or form. And this also goes into with college football, you got to be a good coach, but you also got to be a recruiter. You got to bring in guys that, can kind of already have the talent. Definitely, if we're talking tight end here, Cam McDonald's been on this team for 16 years. So, and that's about all you've had, really. If you go back to maybe Ryan Izzo, you only had what? That's practically. I'm trying to think back, but that's practically your most past guy that was productive.
Yeah, unless you want to go back to the Jameis era, and talk about.
Well, then we're going wow.
Yeah.
No,
you want to talk about the man who survived the bus and actually, I shouldn't say survived. He took the bus full head on, But no, I think the roster building, there's just a lack of it at certain positions, right? So we were kind of going about this question in a roundabout way, but let me just ask you directly, Logan. Is Norvell doing a good enough job building up this roster in the transfer portal through high school recruiting to secure his future at Florida State?
I think he's doing as much as he can with 8 wins in 2 years. I think that's kind of the situation that we're at. I think he's literally hit his limit of his ceiling of how far he can go with, and this is just staying stuck with the 8 wins. If he can go to now, you get 8 wins this next year, you see a whole 180, and that helps him a whole lot more in that regard. Just for specifically staying here, I think that, he's kind of surprised us, and maybe the staff alone has kind of surprised us with how well they've done on the recruiting side. I think they've made some good inside changes. They've made a lot of great additions. I think Florida State's new addition off field, Derek Ray, has been a really nice addition, not only for transfer portal, but for recruiting and just management overall. That's something that Mike Norvell is trying to build a whole another staff on the outside of the field that you see at other SEC schools that help a ton, like Alabama. There's a whole another staff that takes care of everything off the field that Michael Alford is working with Mike Norvell and the administration to help support this program and get it back to where it needs to be. I just have, right now, and I'm getting this from recruits and what we're hearing, I just think they're now looking for wins. Mike Norvell does great with families. He's talking with moms and dads. He's doing a great job recruiting. He's able to land at that time the number 1 player in the country, all that kind of stuff. That's a whole nother different discussion, but that he had that guy locked down. And I think there's a lot of other guys that put Florida State in the top 3, top 2 that usually in years past that they were never going to make the top 5, top 10. But, there were now guys with top tier talent. We're talking elite prospects in the country that are putting Florida State almost at their number 2 if they weren't able to go. You look at Meyerson Mims coming to visit, that seems like Florida State's definitely between Georgia and FSU there. You don't usually see that a ton, and that helps with Alex Atkins being on the staff. But I just think he's kind of hit his max here, and I think he knows that too. And now it's just all about winning. You don't have to stress so much about recruiting and doing all this once you are able to make past a bowl game and bring in 8 wins, even 7 wins for some of these guys. They see the uphill climb, like Mike Norvell says. The climb is what's going to bring them some of these success on the field and definitely in the recruiting room, which is essential in college football.
I think they've done a good job building this roster. I think you hit some of the really great points that they are maxing out, kind of what's given to them, right? What they're dealing with. But also, I think when you look at team building overall, just the way college football is going, the way offenses are being built now to be very successful, I think it's fair to say that they've failed to attack the perimeter in the way other schools have, right? Just look at some of the top offenses, whether it's in the SEC or just look at those Final Four finishers in the college football playoff every single year. They have great perimeter players, great wide receivers, great playmakers. And I guess for me, when you look at Mike Norvell's tenure so far, having the lack of playmakers, that's the real failure I see so far, because you can have a dominant running game in college football. You can dominate on the ground. You can build a really good game, through that. But you also need to be able to take advantage of corners. You need to take advantage of stretching the field. Just as Mike Norvell's offense goes, he needs those players who can stretch the field out, who can get after defenders. And I think the issue for me overall is that, they're building some parts of it, right, Logan? The run game is really good. The offensive line is improving in the way that I think we all think they should improve. They're heading in the right direction. We all believe in Alex Atkins, right? But there's just certain spots where they haven't done a good enough job, and they really haven't improved drastically, especially that receiver position. So I think for me, you're right. They are maximizing, I think, what's given to them in a sense, but also they just haven't done a good enough job attracting wide receiver talent, attracting playmakers, because just with the way offenses are going now, you need to have those elite upper and top tier playmakers. And this year, their best wide receiver might be Mycah Pittman, right? Ontario Wilson, maybe Malik McLean. I just think that they haven't done a good enough job creating a balanced offense and supporting all of their players, because you'll see a lot of Florida State fans, media have the opinion where they're highly critical of Jordan Travis. But then these are the same people that will tell you they can't recruit a damn wide receiver. So which one is it? Because for me, if you're not giving Jordan Travis the support along the perimeter, how is he going to make the most of those opportunities? And I guess that's kind of where I'm at in terms of the roster building. Obviously, I still think they should be better at positions like corner, right? Linebacker. There's some things, but specifically that wide receiver position, there's just been a failure there. And it's really disappointing because I feel like, with how good this run game is, if they just had an average perimeter play, this offense would be a lot better.
Yeah, no, we definitely discussed a lot of that, you and I, on the sidelines inside that IPF for numerous hours, being able to watch that wide receiver room. And the transfer portal helped it a ton, Ben. It was not going to look pretty for next season. And we saw that immediately. Florida State goes after those transfer wide receivers. And that's a big time move when you're bringing in that many guys into your room with four wide receivers. That means that something went really bad last season. And I think, too, you've got guys, like you said, you don't have a true playmaker. You were supposed to have a true playmaker with Dustin Hill. That did not work out whatsoever. You were looking at him to potentially contribute at least a little bit last year if things went well, was able to get in and come to an early part of his career at Florida State. And sadly, that didn't work out. And we'll see what happens this upcoming season. But that they didn't have anybody to stretch the field. You had a true freshman, who I think really highly of, Malik McLean, that I think is probably your most polished guy, and Jordan Travis really likes him. But you're now going to start relying on guys that have not even played a snap with Jordan Travis on a collegiate actual competition, and that's what you're relying on whenever you're going to go face LSU, a talented SEC team. You're going to rely on what you did building that chemistry with those wide receivers, and you're really risking it for a biscuit here. You've got veterans there, but you can have veterans all you want and such, but there's not much the ceiling has been hit. The ceiling was hit a year ago with, I think, a lot of these guys that have been on the team. And, you still got Keyshawn Helton and Terry Wilson. Those guys, I feel like, have been on the team for forever. We saw a strong spring from Portier, but, not a whole lot of ton PT on actual college games. That's something that is going to hurt you a little bit. You're relying a lot on what happened in the spring, but yeah, the wide receiver room, and it all goes down back to recruiting. And Ron Dugans, I think this is by far a hot seat. If it's number one on the sheet here, it's got to be Dugans and what happened and mishaps during the recruiting cycle at the end of it and losing a playmaker. And I think it's a rough go around. It's just got to be. It's got to be switched, definitely in the wide receiver area. But you got to thank God for the transfer portal for Mike Norvell.
Yeah, no, and they have done a good job supplementing the wide receiver position, right? I don't think they've done a great enough job where those guys are going to be taking them over to the top. Because even some of those players you look like Deuce Spann, Johnny Wilson, right? Those are more developmental guys for this season. They don't seem like you'll get some impact, I believe, from Johnny Wilson this year. I think you're going to get, especially towards the end of the season, the more that progresses, the more reps he gets, I think he'll look better and better. But, then I want to go to the comments. Tommy was asking us, where and when are you guys thinking Winston Wright plays a part in the 2022 season? That's the big question I think a lot of us are asking. Logan, we saw him, I believe, Saturday. Is that correct? I don't want to, go overboard with what we can and can't talk about, but we saw Winston Wright in Tallahassee on Saturday.
I'm not entirely sure if I did see him, but I did see a video of him on Corey Fuller's Twitter of him coming back from what it seemed like an outdoor workout. A lot of them were jogging in, but we saw him walking by. I didn't see really anything on him. But hey, that was a public video. We're not over here reporting on anything injury-wise, but Corey Fuller, Florida State's recruiting tool on the off-field, one of the off-field hires that Mike Norvell made this offseason. That's definitely a guy that you hope to have back good to go. You're just thankful that he, went through that wreck and nothing crazy severe, happened. Seems like recovery is going very well from what we heard and just things that we're seeing. But that's a guy that you were hoping to be an essential guy. And I'd be honest with everyone. I really think this spring was going to be big for Winston Wright, and I think it's big for building chemistry with your quarterbacks. And I'll be honest, I'm still kind of scarred from Andrew Parchment from last year because I thought that was, I think a lot of Florida State fans were thinking he'd come in, he'd be that wide receiver one and just be a really good threat against those defenses. And he had his moments, absolutely. He had his moments, but he also had a lot of mishaps, and you could tell that the chemistry with the quarterback room just wasn't there at times. And so that's why I'm not
even then,
sold on
Logan, I mean, Parchment, sorry to cut you off, but he was the leading receiver for Florida State last season. So you're talking about a guy that you weren't even particularly impressed by, who led the team in yards and receptions. And then one thing I saw that over Mike Norvell's tenure, only 2 pass catchers getting more than 300 receiving yards in a season. So it's just a weakness. I think only one player, got more than 2 touchdowns receiving. So look, I think this isn't in a good place right now. You mentioned a guy like Parchment. I don't even feel like we've seen that kind of impact this spring. We haven't seen a guy like that, right, who we believe can be that wide receiver one guy. I think right now, to be honest, they're just patching it together. They're going to be going game to game, situation to situation. I think Mycah Pittman is awesome, but Mycah Pittman is really great if you have the other supporting cast around him to fit those other roles. And I just don't know if they're going to have those guys, but even if you see flashes of those guys, they aren't going to be consistent enough throughout the season to make a huge difference, in my opinion. You'll get spurts, and I think it will improve, but I think the overall point of this conversation, Logan, is they just have not done a good enough job recruiting the wide receiver position. They need to get those top-end guys, if not the top-end guys, damn near close to it, because they don't even really have those type of players right now.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And just like Tommy is saying here in the comments, you definitely see that, Winston Wright is still recovering from that injury. You got to see how much reps he can get this upcoming camp. We'll be in attendance to see everything and, what we can report on. But, if he's a full go, we can talk about it. He wasn't even at the beginning of spring. He was limited to start and didn't get to see him be a full go. And I think that was already kind of question marking, about him for me. He's definitely impressive to see in size and in person. And I just want to see the speed and the factor he has, but I've never been a fan of, trying to come in immediately, definitely missing out a spring like that. And then definitely going through, what he went through with the car wreck that was reported. That just kind of brings back my expectations for what he will bring production-wise for Florida State this upcoming season. I will say Johnny Wilson surprised me a whole ton. I wasn't expecting him to do what he did this spring. I think the biggest thing from what I learned from him, the boy can make plays. He can play all over the field. He's hard to beat in one-on-ones. He's faster than we thought, but it's all going to come down to consistency and when it comes down to a game. And that was just a spring game, and I didn't like the consistency from what I saw from Johnny Wilson. I want to see a change there from him because, we talked a lot about him. I was tweeting about him quite a bit this spring, and it was all real stuff. He was making some serious plays back to back to back, and he looked really impressive. But inconsistency, that's something that he was kind of dealing with at Arizona State. He's got to come down with the ball. He did it all throughout the camp with practices and such, but that was disappointing to see in the spring game. So I would feel a lot more better. If Johnny Wilson would have caught those couple catches in the spring game, I'd be talking Johnny Wilson. He's early in the rotation. He could be a starter, yada, yada, yada. But it all comes down with a wide receiver. You got to catch that damn ball. That's my take there on the rest of the wide receiver room.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. And like Johnny Wilson, just think about this room in general. There's a lot of, high ceiling, low floor guys, right? Especially at the top, you're looking at your Malik McLean's, Johnny Wilson, obviously. I just think they'll be better than they were, these last 2 years, right? I think it will be an improved position. But I don't know if it's still going to be quite enough, right, to support Jordan Travis and the kind of a quarterback I expect him to be. Because I think Jordan Travis has taken a lot of strides as a passer in the pocket, just his ability to be a true pocket passer. I think he's improving leaps and bounds by that from last season, from what we've seen of him. But again, I just don't know if they're going to have the players to support him. And a guy like Johnny Wilson, right, you mentioned he had nice moments in spring. He had a lot of great moments, but there are also the ups and downs, right? And it's just a part of it with that receiving group overall. Just ups and downs with this receiver room. Even Mycah Pittman, who I feel like we all came out of the spring feeling like he's the most consistent guy out of all the guys they have. We even saw some inconsistency from him on a practice-to-practice basis, right? So for as much as we saw from this receiver group, I think there will be flashes, but at the same time, it's going to be a little bit of a roller coaster where some games against certain teams who you have favorable matchups against, they're going to look really good. They'll look better than they were. But then I think they're also going to come back down to earth in games against teams like LSU, Florida, and some of their harder matchups throughout the season. So we'll kind of end that conversation there. We talked a lot about wide receivers, but I think we can both agree, Logan, that Mike Norvell has not done anything to absolutely secure his future. I think even if you were coming off that record and this roster looks a lot better and they were in the same situation where they lost so many close games, we wouldn't be quite having these conversations right now, because I think we'd give them the opportunity to see what those players are, see how those recruits play out. But the fact is just they haven't made those splash names. They haven't gotten those in the recruiting classes. They haven't improved at the positions drastically where they absolutely need to improve. They've found replacements. They found players in the transfer portal. But again, I think we can kind of both agree those guys probably aren't quite enough to really secure Mike's future with the team. You're muted. Okay.
Pulling up the YouTube page over here on the other side of the monitor, so I had to make sure I hit the like button on the page. I had to make sure I hit the like button on the YouTube video.
Hey, of course. And for everyone hanging out, I appreciate it. I think we got 12, 13 people right now watching us live. Go like the channels, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you're checking out all the stuff that Logan, Dustin are doing over at Nole Gameday. They're doing a lot of great work over there. It's going to be really interesting throughout the summer as well. I have an article on Tomahawk Nation all about Jamie Robinson and Akeem Dent. So check that out after the video, right afterwards, because we're going to keep talking a lot more Florida State football. And, you know, I want to talk about the guy who has kind of been in a news cycle a lot recently, who is getting Florida State fans nervous, Logan. Obviously, you know, I want to preface this by saying that you have been able to build a relationship with Chris Parson. Nole Gameday has. You guys have been doing a series with him. You guys have had a lot of interactions with him and his family. But, you know, taking an outside perspective at it, just kind of seeing all the, you know, things we've seen, you know, actions speak louder than words. We've seen a lot of people talking, but we've also seen a lot of people put offers out, and Florida State put other offers out and make different moves. Is it time for fans to start worrying about the Chris Parson commitment?
I think there was definitely, I think it was great to have Parson in attendance for that elite camp. It also made me feel just a little bit better, you know, from what I was hearing. You know, Parson, you know, didn't really want to talk to media. You know, he kind of went through a rough time there about, you know, he was competing at the Elite 11 regionals up there in Nashville. Dustin was in there in attendance, and from what he saw from him, Parson looked really good. You know, he pulled a hamstring early on in the 40 before they were able to do their field workouts, and really put, you know, kind of hurt him a little bit, just both physically, of course, but mentally, and it brought him back. And there was a lot of really good quarterbacks. I believe five or six got invited to the actual Elite 11 finals out of that camp, and that's now including, you know, Parson being able to retrieve one of those. But at that time, he didn't come away with an invite, and so he was pissed, and he didn't like, you know, that, you know, and just something happens like that where you get hurt early on and kind of limits you. That going on, and then, you know, Florida State, you know, had communication with Parson, letting him know that they were indeed offering two more quarterbacks in his class. All of that kind of combined together, kind of put his mental state, I believe, in a kind of in a tough spot. And it's understandable. You know, these are young men and still kind of learning. You've got media every left and right and just everywhere contacting you, just wanting to get a comment on, you know, everything. You know, what do you feel like about Florida State offering these other quarterbacks? And you got Florida State's fan base, which, let's be honest, can be extremely irritating at times. And that's just kind of what comes with the territory nowadays. A lot of these fans care a ton about this football program, and they want to get it back on track. But, you know, I think Florida State fans, if you want to kind of get aggravated at something, you can maybe try to get aggravated at this staff. You do not want to lose Chris Parson. This is a very talented kid. He has a lot of close connections and has helped kind of build a little bit of this class. I think some of when we saw him and being able to spend some time with family, I feel better than how I was before going in. You know, I had a few question marks and how Parson would be, and would he be distant from any of the staff and such. And we saw firsthand, you know, Mike Norvell and Chris Parson communicative all throughout the camp. You saw Parson going and hugging and dapping up and, you know, rooting for a lot of the current commits, him connecting pretty well with Camden Fryer a few times, you know, him going over and making sure routes are being ran well. And like I said, Norvell and him were in really close contact throughout that entire day. And Parson stayed for about the longest out of any recruit in that IPF that night after the camp. So like I said, I feel a lot better than how I was going into it. It was good to catch up with the family and such. And, you know, we talked about in the production meeting, he does have that visit lined up for this weekend with Mississippi State. From what I was told, you know, this is entirely, you know, kind of because his dad went there, graduated from Mississippi State. And I think now it's kind of gotten to the recruitment time where you're locked into a place, but you also do want to take the advantages of being spoiled and, being able to travel, take the free travel trips and go check out these other colleges. But he will not be throwing. He will not be working out in front of these coaches. I think that's definitely worth noting. I haven't heard anything yet if there is expected to be more visits entailed, but the tweets about the offers going out from SMU, getting the other offers, those are all kind of near him too. So living in the area kind of added on to him putting those offers out. And so I got a lot of answers from that weekend from him. I'm not entirely, I know we talked about it last week, but I was like, yeah, there's definitely some question marks. I've got some question marks. So those have been answered. So I feel a little bit better. I might not be able to answer the question down below and the scroller. I don't feel too worried right now. Florida State's got 2 quarterbacks though taking official visits, I believe, this upcoming weekend. So we'll see what ends up happening. But from what I've been told, and it's been that way since day one, Chris Parson is not scared of competition. He's not scared of it. And I think for Parson too, I think he trains very well. He's a guy that gets up so early, trains 4:35 a.m., goes out and does all that and works out with other quarterbacks. I just don't see if I were just be from me thinking that, I just don't think he'd shy away from having another quarterback come in. And I seriously do think Florida State fans, if you're trying to push away a kid that the staff really likes and Coach Tokar really likes, I think that's a really bad decision. Florida State fans are going to do what they want. They'll be silly on Twitter, but this is a kid that you most certainly want to keep in the fold.
I think you made a lot of great points there, Logan. And obviously you do have that connection with the family. You've been talking a lot with them throughout this whole process. So, I know you've been getting a lot of information, talking a lot with them. But, I'll give you the fans' perspective for a second. And maybe, we can't answer the question of should fans be really, really worried right now? Because we just don't know what's going to happen moving forward. We can't predict the future. But the question, I think, looking from an outside perspective is the staff doing too much in terms of going after the quarterbacks they are? Are they playing with fire a little bit too much where they might find themselves at the end of this with no quarterback commitment? To me, that's the bigger worry overall. There's a little minutia of, the competition between some guys offering, Glennon, Collins, and then Parsons putting out those those offers that he got right afterwards. Obviously, that raises some flags, and as they should, right? But is the staff going about this the right way, in your opinion, or are they kind of just playing with fire?
It's all right. Let's say it's. I don't think it's even risky. It's almost a must need at this point.
Okay.
If you're looking now at the quarterback room, Ben, it's something that needs to be done. And,
that is fair. I'll say that's very fair. This is not the deepest quarterback room.
Yeah, I will say this is something that just has to friggin' happen kind of thing here, because you and I saw both multiple times that I don't feel good about the quarterback room going in the next season. I don't think a lot of people do. We get to kind of see it firsthand, and I'm trying to give it about as real as it gets. I do not like that room right now behind Jordan Travis. There's got to be some additions here. I want to see more competition from true talent coming in, and that's why you want to have a Chris Parson come in with one of these other quarterbacks. I'd love for Chris Parson to come in with a Brock Glenn. I'd love for Chris Parson to come in with Ricky Collins. Even if it were to not, I still think Parson is up in that high caliber of talent. You want to have at least 2 quarterbacks come into this situation, no matter if it is one of those 3. You got to try to bring in 2 quarterbacks, Ben, because it's what's needed, and the communication's on point here with letting Parson know about these 2 guys. Ricky Collins, a talented quarterback that's committed to Purdue, and Brock Glenn, who we talked about earlier, has an offer now from Ohio State that's starting to kind of heat up his recruitment a little bit more. Both of those guys will be in attendance at Florida State, and we'll hopefully get some quotes from them after their visits. But it's something that has to happen. And, I know nowadays quarterbacks like to go in and maybe not want to compete, but, or they want to be the solidified guy in that class coming in. But this is the state that Florida State is in. And, Mike Norvell and Coach Tokars can't be nice about it. You got to bring in a handful, or at least 2 quarterbacks in this class, in my opinion, and 2 that, can really do fit your system pretty well. That it seems like both of those quarters, definitely Brock Glenn, he hasn't even, hasn't committed anywhere. You've got Ricky committed to Purdue, but that doesn't seem like that's really much of a lock right now. So those 2 guys you can fit into your system, added with Chris Parson, that's what you need, Ben. That's exactly what you need. So it's a must-need type of thing for Mike and Tokars, and they're doing it. They're having to do it.
Yeah, and I guess that's just part of the whole quarterback landscape right now, is you have to take those risks, right? And trying to get multiple guys in the same class. Given the state of this room, I mean, you're right. They did not impress in the spring behind Jordan Travis. In fact, I got even more worried, and I was a little disappointed by what I'd seen from those 2 guys behind Jordan. So, yeah, the team absolutely needs to find a way to secure the competitive future at quarterback, right? I just having that one starter in place isn't enough anymore, or having one guy who can compete for that spot isn't enough. You'd much rather be in a situation where you have to tell a kid to transfer, right? Where you're like, hey, we let you 2 compete, let you guys duke it out. You didn't win. We're going to give you the opportunity to move on. That's a much better position to be in than the one Florida State is in right now. So we'll see. Time will tell if they have made the right decision in this quarterback room, if they're going about this the right way. But these next few months, this next month really, is really going to be interesting to see how all that plays out, because I believe we know that Collins or is it Glenn? I'm sorry, said he wanted to make his commitment by the end of the month, or near the end of the month, right?
Yeah, no, he wants to make it by this month, I believe, in June. So the thing, like you said, things are going to start getting really interesting. I'm all about it. We're here to cover. We're here to kind of entertain the fans a little bit and have these discussions. So I'm all for it. It was a boring ass May for me, and definitely on the FSU side, I'm down to heat some things up. We've got camps going on, we got visits, we got quarterback, whatever you want to call it, drama or whatever. But I think Florida State's what they're doing, at least on the staff wise, I like what they're doing. But you got to try to keep Parson in the fold, and that's something that we'll see if Florida State can do. But with these official visits coming in with these 2 guys, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be good stuff for some coverage.
Yeah, and I do want to go over to the comment section over here. Serve5 said, it seems like young players don't have great confidence in themselves and are afraid of competition, or they just don't want the competition. They should understand, though, he's saying that we need a lot of players, starters and backups. And I think that's a super fair point. I don't know if they're lacking the confidence or they're afraid of competition, but I do think there's that sense of, some guys, like you said, they just want to go in and be that guy of the class. But I don't think that's the case with some of the recruits that we're talking about. Like you said, with Chris Parson, he is not afraid of competition. That's not why this decision might be wavering at Florida State, if it is, right? It'd be because of other reasons. I think, honestly, more about the future of the head coach. How much longer is he going to be there? That, to me, would be more worrying than, competition at the other positions. But it is a very delicate thing that you have to play these days, Logan, with the way recruiting is, just with the way these kids are. I think the Seminoles have done a good enough job, though, in that they're very communicative with their guys, right? We know exactly what's going on. And, yeah, we'll see how it does play out for the staff. Only time will tell, though. But I appreciate the comments, Serve5. And Logan, the next thing I wanted to ask you about, and we kind of touched on this last time we talked, but, looking deeper at this position, defensive end. Florida State was so dominant there last season. I mean, to say that the Seminoles were very good there last season would be understating. They had 2 players combined for 90 pressures with Keir Thomas, Jermaine Johnson. They were just completely dominant off the edge. But, they brought in some new guys. They brought in Jared Verse, but they're also giving an opportunity to a lot of young guys, right, who were behind Keir and Jermaine to get more snaps, to get more pass rush snaps. But, how big will that drop off be? And are you worried about them losing these 2 guys?
So I've been very impressed since watching spring with the defensive ends. And on the defensive line, I think is, that's the strongest, at least the interior is going to be the strongest unit going into this season for FSU. But defensive end is definitely one of the biggest question marks going into the spring. I wanted to see how Derek McLendon looked now that he gets the outright opportunity to be a starter there on that defensive end spot. And he's worked on his body. I mean, if you guys were to see him in person, he's really, really trimmed down from what he used to look like wearing that number 55 when he was in that interior defensive line. He's been working on his body, and I think he's continuing to do that. He's thinned up and he's gotten a lot faster. He's always been kind of maybe make the play on the field and be a leader type, rather show you than talk. And that's something that, Florida State would like to have after losing a guy like Keir Thomas on that side. And you had Jermaine Johnson. I'll be honest, I think Jared Verse might end up being the star for Florida State's defense this upcoming season. I know we talked very highly about that interior D-line. You've got the safeties too with Jamie, and I know you're excited about Jamie and definitely Akeem Dent. But from what we saw and how quickly Jared Verse came in to impact that entire offensive line and what he was doing to some of those players, which was absolutely silliness and shouldn't be fair for how young he is and how, short of a time he's been in Florida State garnet and gold uniform. That just kind of goes to show me that I think fans are going to absolutely love what they see from number 5. And if he can fit anywhere close to kind of what Akir or Jermaine Johnson did last year, that would be great, because I'd give you one of them. You don't know if you have another one on the other side at the tandem like you had with Thomas and Jermaine Johnson last year. But I was already pretty high on Jared Verse coming in. There was a reason why there was so many schools immediately blowing up his phone with texts, calls, emails, and Tennessee really pushing hard there at the end to grab him, but ends up picking Florida State. He's got a lot of pressure on him, and he talked about that with us on one of our shows. But he said he loves it, and he expects that. And that was something interesting. He could have answered and said, I know there's pressure on me, but I'm just hoping I can get to that level. He said, I'm ready for it. I like that pressure. And it went to show, I already had a feeling he kind of had a competitive drive to him. But then when we saw him in person and the trash talker, the blowing up plays in the run game, and definitely the pass rush of having back-to-back sacks and red zone drills and team. This has, I mean, we haven't even seen him play a snap here in Tallahassee at FSU. But if you want to talk a monster from the spring, that was number 5, Jared Verse, and I like that. I don't like though behind Jared Verse. I mean, I think there's potential there for Pat Payton, but after that, I'm kind of a little worrisome. We saw little things from Byron Turner. I want to see more from him, but I do think it kind of sucks though that you lost Quashon Fuller depth-wise. I do think that really, really did stink. Obviously, the staff really liked to have McLendon over Quashon Fuller, who ended up going to Maryland and transferring, which will most likely get a lot of playing time, if not being the starter over there. But after that, you're kind of limiting yourself if one of those guys were to go down. I like what we saw from Pat Payton. I thought he was one of the most improved from his freshman year with his body type and his physicality and what we were hearing during the scrimmages. But right now, I think you've got one those spots. You've got another Kier, Jermaine, and I think that's Jared Verse. I want to see a little bit more from Derek McLendon, but I think people kind of sleep on him a little bit.
Yeah,
I just think kind of Verse took over our eyes a little bit just because how dominant he was, but you can't sleep on McLendon on the other side either.
No, I will say I'll disagree with you a little bit in the sense that, I don't think they have the best depth along this defensive line. But I think as a whole, when you put this group together, they're going to have waves of pass rushers that they can throw at teams, right? And also a lot of that is going to be because they move those guys all around the defensive line and they're comfortable moving those guys to different positions. Obviously you're going to have your Fox defensive end playing that key role. It's going to be Jared Verse a lot of the time. If not, it's going to be Derek McLendon. But then if you look at the top players who finished with the most pressures for Florida State last season, 2 of them are gone, right? Keir Thomas, Jermaine Johnson, but the other 5 are returning, right? 2 of those guys, Fabian Lovett, Robert Cooper, I think they're going to be a really, really good this season. Obviously, we expect a lot from those guys, but I think as pass rushers too, we're going to see them be even better than they were in the past. And I am a believer in Derek McLendon. I really think, while Jared Verse will probably be that standalone guy, to me, the gap between McLendon and Verse is a lot closer than most people would believe. So I really believe, I guess, when you look at this team in the depth that they're bringing, because I think, once you get late into the season, once you deal with injuries, once you going game after game after game, having the wave of pass rushers that you can bring in, I think they're going to be really successful in that sense where, the group overall does very well. I don't think they'll be able to quite replace the production they were getting last season, but Logan, they were getting the best pass rush in the ACC last year. So even if that's brought down a little bit, right, if they're not the best, I still think this is top 3, top 5 defense in the conference in terms of getting after the passer, in terms of getting sacks, getting pressures, creating havoc. And to me, that's where this defense will be successful, creating havoc, being disruptive, doing all those things. So I think it starts at the defensive line. They won't be as good at edge. Obviously, you just can't. I mean, to have that kind of expectation is just super unrealistic. But what they can do is get creative, find enough ways to use, their linebackers, their safeties, use more of those green dot blitzes that we see Adam Fuller use sometimes. I think they'll be a lot better this season, but I still think that drop-off is going to be major. To me, the key for this defense, Logan, are how many takeaways are they going to be getting this season, right? If you look at takeaways from season to season, they were fairly good last season. They produced a lot of takeaways, but there are also a lot of opportunities left out there by guys like Akeem, right? Akeem Dent himself talked about it in his interviews that he should have made more plays. We saw in the spring him making those plays finally. So I think the coverage being better on the back end will help out, this defensive front for Florida State. But at the same time, they're just not going to be what they were in 2021.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention too, Dennis Briggs. He was limited during the spring. He was limited during the spring. Didn't get to see a whole lot from him. I think he's still working on his body a little bit more. I think I'm expecting that to happen because I think he's still almost a hybrid between an interior guy and a defensive end. I don't think he's as fast and twitchy as a guy like a Verse or definitely Derek McLendon. No. Those are your 2 speedy guys off the edge. He's kind of right in between there, and I'm interested to see how Florida State and Odell Higgins use him. But he is a veteran that looked really good before he got hurt. And definitely whenever he came back the year prior from the COVID and exempted, decided to stay out, season came in in shape. So if things work out well and he recovers well and works on his body, I'm not too worried about him. And I think he'll be a really good player and, could maybe compete there with Derek McLendon on that other side. But for takeaways, that's all going to come down to, I believe, the bull rush and the nastiness between those 2, Lovett and Cooper from the inside. That's going to probably disrupt a lot of things. And they did that against Miami, absolutely hurting there on the inside. And that allowed, Kier and also Jermaine Johnson just to kind of do whatever the F they wanted to do and get back there and go to Tyler Van Dyke and just toss him around like a rag doll. That's something.
Hey, by the way, Logan, you can say whatever they want. They were fucking getting after Tyler Van Dyke, man. I mean, they're absolutely like the pressure they were getting was really important. And I think that's where they find their success this season, right? Is that interior of that defensive line is going to be the strength of this defense, let alone just that the line overall. So having those guys be disruptive, be those playmakers in both the run and the pass, I think, they'll both be better this season. And I think that's going to raise the room and the ability overall of this team to pass rush, to run and then run defense and run fitting. So I do have really high expectations, right? I still think this will be one of the better defensive lines in the ACC. This will be one of the better pass rushers, but I think this is all to kind of say you still cannot replace what they had last season, even though they'll still be very good.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing. That'll allow for more takeaways. And Keem Dent had a really good spring, and I think Mike Norvell said he might have been the most impressed out of him on the defensive side of the ball. And we saw 2 scrimmages. Didn't get to see him actually because Mike won't let us see that, but I'm not complaining too much. He did let us see inside Doak for the red zone kind of scrimmage there for us at the end of the spring. So I won't complain too much, but from what we heard from sources, Keem Dent looked really, really, really good and had takeaways. We got to see it firsthand too in those practices. And that's a veteran guy, Ben, that has, kind of had a inconsistent career. Florida State started off strong and kind of fell down and then dealt with injuries. And now it's starting to see a rise.
Yeah.
Takeaway
he's paid his dues, man.
Works.
He's paid his dues. And I think what we saw at the end of the year, Logan, was when he was next to Jamie, I mean, those two together were just elite. I don't think really they have weaknesses, right? I think you can point to things you might want Jamie or Akeem to do slightly better, but I think those guys are average or above average or elite in almost every single skill set you would want as a safety. You're talking about a guy like Akeem making such a big leap in the spring. I want to talk about players in 2022. Obviously, we've had the pleasure of getting to see the practices. Obviously, like you said, not the scrimmages, but we've seen how these players have been performing, where they've improved that since the fall. But for you, is there one player or one position group you think is going to take that leap in 2022?
Leap time. I thought going into the spring it was going to be the offensive line, but that completely erased after probably the first week or maybe the second week. Or give them the second week, but a position group that I think will most likely take a leap, and I'll be honest with you, I think it's going to be linebacker. Randy Shannon coming in, first year linebackers coach. This is kind of a risk it for a biscuit kind of dealio here. I'm relying a lot on Tatum Bethune with his experience and his tackle machine and his tenacity, and also good guy with some hands and good takeaways. I'm relying a lot on that UCF transfer linebacker, and I'm relying a lot on Kalen DeLoach here too. I'll be honest with you, and I'm relying on DJ Lundy, who looked a lot better in coverage during the spring, and that's something that I know Adam Fuller, along with Mike Norvell, talked about, that they out of that spring they liked how he was and how he moved. Still got to work on his body some more. I think that's what Coach Fuller said. Still working on that body and trimming down some extra weight, but for what he was and how he was looking throughout the practices, his coverage got a lot better. I still kind of have some question marks for Steven Diggs Jr. I'm kind of still question marks about Amari Gaynor, and it's more of kind of figuring out where you're going to use him. I wish they'd use him more in pass rush, and then kind of going down more near the line for him, because he's a tweener kind of guy. You got to figure out where you want to put him. He's had his ups and a lot of just more inconsistencies for Gaynor. And so I think those are some question marks there, but I think you like your starting guys there. And I think if you're going to see it, the side of the ball on defense, at least, to kind of have more of a better swing than they did last year, I think it's going to be that linebacker room, if I'm going to say one, because practically, Kalen DeLoach might have been the most shocking development dude that exploded for Florida State's defense last year. And much needed. And going into his true year 2 as being a starter will be really fun to watch.
I'm a little disappointed, I got to say, Logan. I was hoping you'd come on here tell me, Ben, I think you're a genius. Akeem Dent is going to take that leap in 2022. He's that guy. But, I understand you don't want to steal other people's work. That's not what either of us do.
Nope. No, we don't want to do that.
But I do think Akeem Dent is going to take a giant leap in 2022. But he's not who I have earmarked for this. What I'm looking at in terms of improvement from last season especially, and I look particularly at the beginning of last season, you said the offensive line was a little underwhelming in the spring, but I got to be honest, Logan, given where they're coming from, I think this is going to be the biggest improvement of any group they have in 2022. They're going to take the leap in the sense that, where they were last year to where they're going to be at the beginning of next year, I think it's going to be massively felt, because not only was this the worst offensive line in the ACC, this was one of the worst offensive lines in college football. They ranked, I believe, 120th out of 130 Division I teams in terms of just offensive line, run blocking grade, pass blocking grade, grading out overall with PFF system. But also, if you just look at the consistency of that group, Logan, this was by far the most inconsistent group, where the offensive line needs that consistency more than any other room, right? We saw for the first 6 games last season, they were just dealing with massive injuries. I think there was only over that period, they only had the same starting offensive lines in consecutive weeks once. So this is a team that is dealing with constant turnover at the offensive line position, moving guys around to other positions, because one guy goes down here, you need a guy to fill in there. That guy gets hurt, you need someone to fill in for him. And then, what do you do about the position he was at before? They were just dealing with so much every single week. That bad luck is not going to happen again this season. And I don't think this room is going to be, world beaters. I don't think there's going to be one of the better offensive lines in the ACC, but I think what we will see out of them, and I think fans will notice especially, is that they'll be able to hold their own in a better way to where they can support Jordan Travis. To me, that was the issue last season, is they did not have the pass protection skills nor the consistency to be able to pass block in the right way for Jordan Travis, to be able to create the opportunities for him to be the playmaker that we know he is, right? So given all the inconsistency they had, given all the ups, or really just all the downs that they had last season, bringing in Bless Harris, bringing in Hayden Lyles, bringing in Dimitri Emmanuel, look, this group, they're not going to be producing tons of NFL offensive linemen, but this will be a very, very solid group where last season, this was the Achilles heel for Florida State, right? They were, not only were they bad, but they were extremely unlucky at this position last season with injuries. So I'm giving them a little bit of injury luck. I'm projecting forward a little bit, but I think if things stand the way they are, and, they bring in some of those young offensive linemen over the summer too, like Julian Armella, this should be the biggest difference in terms of a group improving from last year to next year.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to health. And I liked what we saw from the starting group. I think there's just a few question marks, and it's hard to tell too, because God, is this Florida State defensive line really just going to be causing havoc all throughout the year, which I have a feeling they are. Yeah. And that should make this offensive line better. You love having those kind of battles, definitely in the trenches, to help one of those sides get better. And that's the side offensive line that's going to continue to have to improve under Coach Atkins. And, they're still, like you just said, they're still looking at guys, even after grabbing Dimitri Emmanuel, they're still looking at grabbing Bless Harris. They're still, you're maybe about to have an official visit from South Carolina transfer too. So you're still in the market for some linemen. You're looking also at a JUCO offensive line. So they're not entirely maybe pleased there, and it might just be for depth reasons, but I don't think it's really bad. I think they're still trying to figure out who maybe their starting group may be, and there might be some moves around there too. I think that's what Coach Atkins and Florida State are doing, that offensive line. It's just, I think there's got to be health, and you had mentioned it earlier. They went down a lot last year. You're putting pieces together out of nowhere on road games, and that's just something that you just can't friggin' do. I mean, that's something that you got guys playing positions they never had on the road, and it's just a recipe for friggin' disaster. So if they can fix that, and there's a reason why they're bringing in this big, gigantic class of offensive linemen. We got to see Quashawn Sapp on Saturday, his size. We got to see Julian Armella, who looks really, really good and in shape. I mean, he does. He's definitely impressive. And you get to see Kaniah Charlton trimming down also there. And then you're hoping to see Ontavious Woody here in about a week or so, a little over a week in Tallahassee. So you're building this big old offensive line class. You're hoping. And you also had Daughtry Richardson, who I think had a really good, pretty decent spring for a true freshman, who I thought was really impressive. We saw a lot of love from the coaching staff and Coach Atkins for a lot of those reps and those battles. So there's definitely some optimism that there will be a swing for next season for them.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned, like you said, the depth will be a lot better for this group, but they do just have to stay healthier, right? It is a matter of injury luck and things going your way in terms of, we kind of just expect injuries at this point, right? But it's where you get injured. It's who are those next guys up. And I feel like that's what Alex Atkins has done such a great job of, especially in the transfer portal, is addressing, if we are going to lose someone here, we need to have that replacement ready, someone who can come and play right away, who is experienced at that position before, guys like Emmanuel, guys like Bless Harris. And I think Bless Harris is going to be the starting right tackle. I really think he's going to be very good in that position too. But I wouldn't say they're completely too deep yet at every spot, but they're comfortable enough where they have 8, maybe 9 guys who, they can put in at different spots, who they can figure out different situations for. And to me, Logan, biggest part about this is Alex Atkins. I just trust Alex Atkins. I think he's done a fantastic job recruiting. And I love watching him interact with his players in practice. I think he's a fantastic coach who I would want to play for. And I think he's going to implement that this season. I think we're going to see, the work that he's put in recently pay off. And whereas this Florida State offensive line room was so down for year after year after year after Jimbo Fisher left, I think they're heading in the right direction. And they're going to be very, very good in the future. And hopefully back to where they were a decade ago, right? I think Alex Atkins is doing a really good job moving towards that. I guess for me, I like some of the pieces they brought in. I also think part of this, luck just has to go your way, obviously. But also Alex Atkins, I trust him. And I think he is that dude. And I think he's one of the most important coaches on this staff. And, I think what he's been doing is really going to pay off this season.
Yeah, the future is definitely bright for that offensive line, and I'd like to see that improve. Everybody's just got to stay healthy though, and I don't think with Caden Lyles coming in that fixes any problems that you might have had at the center spot from what we watched in the spring. Wasn't too impressed from him, and I don't think Lyles. I think it's big conditioning summer for him. I think we got to go to the stadium. We got to go into Doak. We're going to go do some conditioning. He's not in trouble or anything. Storms, they're not out there, having to, hurt him, but they're going to have to hurt him a little bit because I don't think he was going to make it through a full, 4 quarters, maybe 2 quarters. He just didn't look like he was in shape. I don't think that, he was going to come in and immediately understand the system. You're hoping that throughout starting after that spring, now all the way to August, whenever we get into camp, or late July, whichever that is, that he is able to, he's worked on his body, he can play well and compete with Maurice Smith. You'd like to have a competition there, but right now I think Maurice Smith has that position on lockdown, and we'll see if that changes. So that's really the last thing for me on offensive line is watching and seeing it. Can Lyles compete with Maurice Smith for that center spot? We'll see.
Yeah,
I think we're all heading into spring thinking that was, Maurice is going to get a year off of this, right, and Lyles is going to come in. Nah, that's not the case anymore. It's Maurice's job to lose, and I'd love to see a competition come out of it. But he's got to get in better shape.
Yeah, and I would say that is the biggest worry for me right now, that center position, because I don't think they have the depth that they need there. You mentioned Caden Lyles. he was just super underwhelming this spring, and he's got to prove it in the fall. But, you know, I think there's also reason to believe he'll have that opportunity to improve in the fall because it is such a tough transition coming to a new system with new verbiage. That's something completely different from what you were doing before. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt in that. But I will say, even when we saw him, Logan, in that spring game atmosphere, especially going back and watching some of that film, he just didn't win the reps he needed to win. You know, he's not winning against the players he needs to win against. And I think that was a really disappointing part. But in terms of the rest of the room, I don't think there were really many disappointments, if not any. I think what we saw from the rest of that room is an improved, more versatile room, which is the key for Florida State this season. They just can't be in the situation they were last season where, you know, they just go down with some offensive lineman and then you got to put one guy at a position where he has no experience, and, you know, another guy goes down, then you have to figure something out. Like I don't think they'll be in as dire straits as they were last season. So that's what really gives me, I would say, the most optimism for this group.
I agree too. They feel like they got a little bit more, hopefully, depth back there for the transfers coming in with the experience. So you kind of know where you can plug and play. So if you're on the road again, you can not have to put someone that's maybe never played at the center position to have to go over there and play over there at guard. You know, you can kind of know what you're working with if you were to get to that spot because you've added in those guys now. And, you know, you've got some guys too that can play two different positions if need be. You just hope you don't have to get to that way, but it's all going to have to come down to health and Coach Storms and what he does with some of these guys and conditioning, and also put on some size like a guy like Murray Smith. So, you know, Coach Storms and Coach Atkins, those guys got a busy off season ahead and what they want to do and figure out where some of these pieces go and build in some muscle and also maybe showing off some fat and hopefully conditioning some of these guys.
And I think that's where we're going to end today, Logan. This was a really great discussion that we had. I want to encourage everyone to go check out the live stream you'll be doing later tonight, 7:30 Eastern time. Where's that going to be, Logan, just so everyone knows?
Yeah, that will be on our page, just Nole Gameday. We'll be having 1999 national champion with us on the show, which I'm looking forward to. I don't know if this is cut off or not.
Yeah, you're cut off right now. You're cut off.
There we go. There we go. It's Tommy Pauly, who's a 1999 national champion linebacker. He went off to the NFL too. So it'll be interesting to get his take on a little bit of maybe Florida State's defense, time with Mickey Andrews and such. So that'll be on Nole Gameday. We'll be doing that at 7:30 tonight. We're trying to squeeze it in a little bit before the Lightning game. I know everybody's going to shut the friggin' thing off right away once that Lightning game comes on, but looking forward to having a discussion there, and we'll talk some more about the big recruiting weekend that happened this past weekend and the one ahead with all these official visitors on the quarterback side. So it's going to be fun stuff.
And just for everyone watching, we'll be back again next week on Thursday. We'll have some more interesting discussions. I'm sure there'll be more to talk about after this weekend with all the quarterback visits. So I encourage everyone, go check out what Logan's doing over at Nole Gameday. Make sure you're reading all the stuff they're putting out as well. Check out Tomahawk Nation. The link is below for both those. The link to both my Twitter and Logan's Twitter are in the description. So if you want to find out more about what we're doing, see more Florida State content, read more good stuff, you can go check that out there. Yeah, I think that's it for me today, Logan. I look forward to seeing everyone back again, hopefully around this time next week. We're shooting for Thursdays in the afternoons to do this show live. So, Logan, thanks for coming on, man, and I look forward to the next one we'll be doing.
Absolutely, Ben. Looking forward to next week. Everybody hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to Ben's account so then you get notified every time we go live. I'm looking forward to talking some more FSU heading into the season.
And for everyone listening on audio, make sure you jump over to YouTube. Type in Ben Meyerson Football. You can check us out over there. We'll be doing a lot more stuff live as well. So we like to dig into the comments, interact with the people. And, hey, I know Tommy's going to be there because he just told me he is. So make sure you're there too. But that'll be it for us today. Thank you so much for watching, listening, however you're consuming this. Just looking forward to the next listen, watch, however you're going to consume this. Have a good one.